Let me tell you about a morning I have never been able to forget. I wasn't supposed to be there that day. That's the part that still gets me. If the bus had come on time, if my sister hadn't called, if I had just turned left instead of right, I would have missed the whole thing. And I would have lived the rest of my life never knowing that a single soldier, standing perfectly still outside a palace, was keeping a promise that nobody else in the world even understood. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me slow down. Let me start where it really started. It was a gray morning in the kingdom of Caldris. Late autumn. The kind of cold that doesn't bite at you all at once. It just sort of leans against you, slow and patient, until your fingers go numb inside your gloves and you can't remember the last time you felt them. I was standing across from Ashmere Palace. Now if you've never been to Caldris, picture this. A long stone square worn smooth by a few hundred years of feet, tall black gates with gold tips, and behind those gates the palace itself, pale stone, rows and rows of windows, half of them dark, all of them watching. There's a fountain in the middle of the square that they switch off in winter, so it just sits there, dry and quiet, full of dead leaves and a few coins that nobody bothered to collect. That morning the square was busy, tourists mostly. You could tell them apart from the locals right away. The locals walked fast, coats buttoned, eyes down. The tourists walked slow with their phones up, turning in circles like they were trying to swallow the whole place with their eyes. There was a school group near the fountain. Maybe 40 kids, all in matching blue jackets, all making far too much noise for that hour. 2 teachers were trying to keep them in a line and failing. There was a man selling roasted chestnuts from a little cart, and the smell of it drifted across the whole square, sweet and smoky and warm, the one warm thing in all that cold. And there were the guards. You couldn't miss them. There were 3 at the main gate that morning, and they stood the way those guards always stand, straight, still, like they'd been poured into the stone and left to set, long dark coats, tall fur caps that came down low over the brow, rifles held just so, you'd swear they weren't even breathing. The tourists loved them, of course. People always loved the guards. There was a small crowd gathered in front of the nearest one, and you could see the usual game playing out. People posing beside him, people pulling faces. A young man tried to make him laugh by doing some little dance, waving his arms about like a fool. The guard didn't move, not an inch, not a flicker. His eyes stayed fixed on something far away that only he could see. That was normal. That was the show people came for. But here's the thing. There was a 4th guard. And the 4th guard was the reason everything happened. He wasn't at the main gate with the others. He was off to the side, near a small black door set into the palace wall, a side door, the kind of door you wouldn't even notice unless someone pointed it out to you. No gold on it. No grand steps leading up to it. Just a plain black door, a little weathered, with a single lamp above it that wasn't even lit. And in front of that door stood one guard, alone. No crowd around him. No tourists posing. Most people walked straight past him without a second look, because the main gate had all the spectacle and this little door had none. He was just a man in a long coat, standing in front of a door that seemed to lead nowhere important. I only noticed him because of the chestnut cart. I'd gone over to buy a paper cone of them, partly because I was hungry, partly just to hold something warm, and the cart was parked close to that side door. So while I waited for my chestnuts, I had nothing to do but look at him. And the longer I looked, the more something felt off. I couldn't have told you what at first. He stood like the others, straight-backed, still. The same dark coat, the same tall cap, but there was something about the way he held his stillness. The guards at the main gate were still the way a statue is still, like stillness was their job, their performance, the thing they'd been told to do. This one was still the way a man is still when he's guarding something he actually cares about. There's a difference. I can't explain it any better than that. You'd know it if you saw it. His eyes weren't fixed on the far distance like the others. They moved, just slightly. They tracked the square. They watched the crowd. And every now and then, I swear this is true, they flicked back toward that little black door behind him, like he was making sure it was still shut. The chestnut man handed me my cone. I gave him a coin. I should have walked away. I didn't. I stayed there near the cart, eating chestnuts that were too hot, watching a soldier I didn't know guard a door I'd never heard of, on a cold gray morning when I should have been somewhere else entirely. And that's when the cars came. You always hear them before you see them. That's the strange thing about royal cars. They don't roar, they glide. But there's a quality to the sound, a kind of low, heavy hush, that makes the whole crowd go quiet before anyone even knows why. That's what happened. 1 second the square was full of noise, kids shouting, tourists laughing, the chestnut man calling out his prices. And then the sound came rolling in, and bit by bit, head by head, everyone went still. 3 cars, black, polished so bright they looked wet. They came in slow through the far end of the square, past the dry fountain, and pulled up not at the main gate, which surprised everyone, but at the side, near the small black door. Near my guard. The crowd started pressing forward. You know how people are. The moment something royal appears, everyone forgets their manners. The school kids broke their line completely and rushed toward the rope barrier, and the 2 teachers gave up and just followed them. Phones came up everywhere. A low buzz of excited whispering ran through the square. Is it the king? No, no, look at the flag on the car. It's her, it's the queen. And it was. The doors opened. Men in dark suits got out first. You could tell the security right away, the way they moved, the way their eyes were never still. And then from the middle car she stepped out. Queen Sabine. Now I should explain something, for those of you who don't follow these things. Caldrus had lost its old queen not long before, Queen Eleonora. She had been on the throne longer than I had been alive. Most of us couldn't remember a time before her. She died the winter before last, and the whole kingdom had gone quiet for weeks, proper quiet, the kind where strangers nod at each other in the street because they're all carrying the same grief. And then her son had taken the throne, King Aldous, and his wife had become the new queen, Queen Sabine. People didn't quite know what to make of Sabine yet. That's the honest truth. She was younger. Modern, they called her, though I was never sure if that was meant as a compliment. She liked things done her way. She'd already changed a few of the old customs, small things mostly, but people noticed. There'd been talk. There's always talk. She came out of that car looking exactly the way you'd expect. Pale coat, fitted perfectly. Hair done so neat it didn't move in the wind. A string of pearls. She had that look some people have, where they seem to glow a little brighter than everyone around them, like the light has chosen them on purpose. The crowd loved it, people clapped, someone called out a blessing, the kids waved. She gave a small wave back, a practiced one, and then she turned and she walked toward the side door. Toward my guard. And I watched him. He didn't move. Of course he didn't, that's the job, but something changed in his face, just the smallest thing. His jaw tightened. His eyes, which had been roaming the crowd, came to rest on the queen, and they stayed there, steady, watchful. She walked right up to him, close, closer than people usually get to the guards. The security men hung back a little, giving her space. There was a woman with her too, an aide, I thought, in a gray coat, carrying a slim leather folder against her chest. And then the queen spoke to him. Now I was too far away to hear the words. I want to be honest about that. I couldn't hear what she said, not that first time, but I could see it. I could see her speaking to him, pleasant at first, a small smile, a tilt of the head. The kind of thing you do when you expect to be obeyed and don't think you'll have to say it twice. And I could see him not move. She gestured at the door, a light gesture. Open it, the gesture seemed to say. Step aside, let me through. He didn't. He stood there like the stone behind him. She said something else. The smile was still there, but it had gone a little thinner now. The aide stepped forward and said something too, holding up the leather folder, as if to show him a paper, an order, a piece of authority on a page. The guard's eyes dropped to the folder for half a second. And then they came back up. And he still didn't move. I want you to understand what a strange thing this was to watch. Because here's what you have to know about those guards. They obey. That's the whole point of them. That discipline, that stillness, that perfect order, it's all in service of one thing, which is that when the crown gives an order, the order is followed. That's the deal. That's been the deal for hundreds of years. And here was the queen herself, the actual queen, standing right in front of him, asking him to do something, and he was saying no. Not with words. He hadn't said a single word yet as far as I could tell. He was saying no with his body, with his stillness, with the simple, immovable fact of him standing where he stood and not stepping 1 inch to the side. The crowd had felt it too. You could tell. The clapping had stopped. The excited buzz had died down into something quieter, more uncertain. People had come to see the queen smile and wave. They hadn't come to see this, whatever this was. A man near me muttered, "What's he doing?" His wife shushed him, but she was leaning forward too, watching just as hard. The school kids had gone quiet, which, believe me, for a group of 40 kids is a small miracle on its own. Even they could feel that something was happening that wasn't supposed to. The queen's smile was gone now. I saw her say something sharper. I saw her hand cut through the air, a small, frustrated motion. The aide flipped open the folder and held it right up in front of the guard's face, jabbing a finger at whatever was written there. And the guard slowly, very slowly turned his head. He looked at the door behind him. Just for a moment. Just one long, quiet moment. He looked at that plain black door with the unlit lamp above it, the door that nobody had given a second thought to all morning. And then he looked back at the queen. And he shook his head. One slow final. A gasp went through the crowd. A real one. You don't shake your head at a queen. You don't refuse her to her face in front of 100 strangers and 40 schoolchildren and a man selling chestnuts. It simply isn't done. But he had done it. The queen took a step back. I could see, even from across the square, that her face had changed, that careful royal calm had cracked just a little, and underneath it was something raw and surprised and angry. She wasn't used to this. You could see she wasn't used to this. Nobody had told her no in a very long time. She turned to her security. She said something to them. 2 of the suited men started forward. And that's when an old man near the front of the crowd, a local, you could tell, in a worn flat cap and a coat that had seen many winters, said something out loud that I will never forget. He said it quietly, almost to himself, but I was close enough to catch it. He said, "It's the old queen's door." I turned to look at him. What? He didn't take his eyes off the guard. His face had gone pale, and something in his eyes had gone soft and far away, like he was looking at the present and the past both at once. "That door," he said, "that's the old queen's door, that's her protocol he's keeping." He shook his head slowly. "God, I didn't think anyone still." And then he stopped himself and pressed his lips together and wouldn't say any more. "What protocol?" I asked him. "What's behind the door?" But he just shook his head again. And there were tears standing in his old eyes now, the kind that don't fall, that just sit there and shine. "You don't know," he whispered. "None of you young ones know, but that man," he nodded at the guard, "that man knows, and he's not going to move, not for her, not for anyone." He swallowed hard. "Not until it's time." I had no idea what he meant. But across the square, the 2 security men had reached the guard now. They were standing on either side of him. One of them put a hand out as if to guide him, to move him aside. And the guard's grip shifted on his rifle. Not a threat, nothing like that. It was a small thing, just his hand settling, his stance firming, the way a man braces himself when he has decided, deep down where decisions really live, that he is not going to be moved. The whole square seemed to hold its breath. The queen was watching. The crowd was watching. The school kids were watching with their mouths open. The chestnut man had come out from behind his cart to see. And one guard stood in front of one plain black door, alone, against the Queen of Cauldress and all her men, keeping a promise that an old man in a flat cap had just told me belonged to a dead woman. I didn't understand it yet, but I was about to. Because what happened next, what was behind that door, and why the old queen had given the order she gave, and why this one soldier would rather face the anger of a living queen than break faith with a dead one, that's the part of the story that changes you. That's the part I came here to tell you. But I'm going to need a moment before I do. Because even now, all these years later, I can't say it without my throat going tight. I told you I'd need a moment. Here it is. Let me tell you the rest the way it happened, slow, the way it deserves. So picture it again. The two security men on either side of the guard, one of them with his hand half raised. The queen a few steps back, her face gone tight and pale. The whole square holding its breath like the air itself was afraid to move. And the guard not moving, not blinking, just standing in front of that plain black door like the door was the last thing in the world worth standing for. The security man put his hand on the guard's shoulder. And the guard spoke. For the first time that whole morning, he opened his mouth and he spoke. And his voice, God, I'll never forget his voice. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was quiet and it was steady, and it carried across that silent square the way a quiet voice does when everyone has stopped breathing to hear it. He said, I have my orders. That was all, 4 words. The security man leaned in, said something low just for the guard, but in that silence half of us caught it anyway. He said, your orders come from Her Majesty. She's standing right there. And the guard turned his head. Slow, he looked the security man dead in the eye. And he said, not these orders. A murmur went through the crowd. I felt the old man beside me go very still. His hands were trembling now, the way old hands do in the cold, but I don't think it was the cold. The queen stepped forward again, and this time she spoke loud enough for everyone to hear, because I think she'd realized, the way you realize something a half-second too late, that this was no longer a private thing. The whole square was watching now. The phones were up. Whatever happened next was going to be seen. Soldier, she said. Her voice was beautiful and cold like ice on a window. Do you know who I am? And the guard said, yes, Your Majesty. Then you know what it means to refuse me. I do, Your Majesty. And you'll do it anyway. There was a pause, a long one. And then he said the thing that turned the whole square inside out. He said, I gave my word to the Queen, Your Majesty, and I keep my word to the Queen. She frowned, I am the Queen. And he looked at her, and his face didn't change, but something behind his eyes did, something old and sad and absolutely certain. And he said very quietly, not to this door, ma'am. To this door the Queen is still Eleonora. I heard the old man beside me make a sound. It was small. It was almost nothing. A breath, a half-sob, the sort of noise that comes out of a person before they can stop it. And when I looked at him, the tears that had been sitting in his eyes all this time had finally spilled over, and they were running down the deep lines of his face, and he wasn't even trying to wipe them away. He remembers, the old man whispered. After everything, he remembers. Remembers what? I said, please, what's behind that door? And the old man finally told me. I'm going to tell it to you the way he told it to me, standing there in the cold with the whole square frozen around us. Because once you know it, you'll understand everything. You'll understand why that guard stood his ground. You'll understand why I've never been able to forget that morning. And maybe, if you're anything like me, you'll find your own eyes going hot and your own throat going tight. Here's what was behind the door. Years ago, long before any of this, Queen Eleonora had a son. Not the king, not Aldous, a second son, a younger boy named Theo. Most people in Caldris didn't even know he'd existed. He'd been born sickly, the old man told me, frail from the very start. There was something wrong with his heart, some flaw the doctors could name but couldn't fix, and from the time he was small, everyone knew he wouldn't have the long life his brother would. The palace kept it quiet. That was the way in those days. You didn't show the kingdom your weak places. You didn't let them see a prince who couldn't run, couldn't ride, couldn't stand for long without going pale and breathless. So little Theo was kept inside, kept private, loved fiercely by his mother and hidden carefully from the world. And the one place in all the palace that the boy loved, the one place he asked for, again and again, was a small garden behind a plain black door on the side of the building. It wasn't grand. The old man said it was barely a garden at all, just a little square of green tucked between two wings of the palace out of the wind, where the afternoon sun came in late and stayed long. There was a stone bench, a few rose bushes that his mother had planted, a little fountain, a small one, nothing like the great dry thing in the square that made a soft trickling sound the boy loved to fall asleep to. That garden was Theo's whole world. He couldn't go out into the kingdom, so his mother brought a small, quiet, gentle piece of the world to him through that plain black door. And when Theo was 9 years old, his heart finally gave out. He died in that garden, on the stone bench in the late sun, with his mother holding him and the little fountain whispering away beside them. The old man's voice broke when he told me that part. He had to stop. He pressed the back of his trembling hand against his mouth and breathed, and when he could speak again, his voice was barely there at all. "I was a young man then," he said. "I served in the palace. Kitchen work, nothing grand, but I saw her after. I saw the queen come out of that garden." He shook his head. "I'd never seen a person look like that, like something had been taken out of the middle of her and there was just a hole left where it used to be." He wiped his eyes. "And do you know what she did?" I shook my head. "She made a rule," he said. "An order, she called it her protocol, her own private one just for that door. From that day on, that little garden was to be kept exactly as it was. The roses tended, the fountain running in the warm months, the bench cleaned, and the door was to be guarded, always, by one of her own, and no one was to be let inside without her say, not staff, not nobles, not ministers." He looked at me. "Not even another king or queen. Only Eleonora or someone she named could open that door, because it wasn't a palace room anymore, you see. It was the last place her boy had been alive. It was holy, and she would not have it turned into anything else." He looked back across the square at the guard. "And every soldier who took that post," he said softly, "made her a promise, personally, to her face. They swore to keep the door and keep the garden and keep the protocol for as long as she lived, and after until she was buried beside her son and the order was lifted by her own family in her own way with the respect it was owed." He went quiet, and then he said the thing that broke me. "She died last winter," he said, "but she was never buried beside Theo. There was a state funeral, a grand one, the crypt with all the old kings, and nobody thought to remember a little boy in a garden or a promise made over a stone bench 20 years ago." His chin trembled. "I thought it was forgotten. I thought it had all died with her. I thought there wasn't a soul left in that whole palace who remembered why a plain black door had a guard in front of it." He nodded at the soldier. The tears came again. "But he remembers. That boy out there remembers. He swore it and he's keeping it, and the new queen wants that garden opened up for whatever it is she wants, a renovation, a tear-room, a fashion shoot, who knows, who cares, and he's telling her no." His voice cracked clean in half. "He's telling the Queen of Caldris no, over a dead woman and a dead boy and a promise nobody else even remembers. God help me. I didn't think there was that much honor left in the world." I stood there. I don't know how long. The chestnuts had gone cold in my hand. I'd forgotten I was holding them. Across the square, I looked at that guard with completely new eyes. He wasn't just a soldier being stubborn anymore. He wasn't a man making a scene. He was the last keeper of a grieving mother's most sacred wish, the only person in the whole kingdom who still stood watch over a door that led to a little garden where a child had died in the sun. And he was about to lose everything for it. Because the queen had had enough. You could see it. Her patience was gone, burnt right through. She didn't know the story that was plain. Nobody had told her. She'd come to a door she thought was just a door, and a soldier was defying her in front of the whole world, and to her it must have looked like nothing but insolence. Pure, baffling insolence. She turned to the senior security man, the older one, gray at the temples, who'd been hanging back. And she said, clear and cold, "Have him removed from his post, now, and bring me someone who knows how to follow an order." The crowd reacted. A low groan, a wave of unhappy muttering. People didn't like it. They didn't fully understand what they were watching. Most of them hadn't heard the old man's story the way I had, but they could feel it. They could feel that something good and rare was happening in front of them, and they could feel it about to be crushed. The senior security man hesitated. I saw it. We all saw it. He hesitated. He looked at the queen, and then he looked at the guard, and something passed over his face, some flicker of doubt, some half-memory, like a man hearing a tune he used to know. But an order is an order. He stepped forward. And the guard, knowing what was coming, knowing he was about to be dragged from his post, and likely thrown out of the service he'd given his whole life to, the guard did the most extraordinary thing. He came to attention. Slowly, deliberately. He brought his heels together. He squared his shoulders. He lifted his chin. He stood in front of that door in the fullest and proudest position a soldier can take, not bracing to fight, not bracing to run, but standing the way you stand when you have decided that if you're going to lose everything, you're going to lose it on your feet, in good order, with your honor intact. And then he said, loud now, loud enough for the whole square, loud enough that it bounced off the palace walls and came back to us doubled. "My queen gave me an order, and I will die at this post before I break it. If you take me from here, you'll take me from here knowing that I kept faith. That's all I have. That's all I am, and you can't make me give it up." Silence. Total ringing silence. The senior security man stopped. He just stopped. 2 steps from the guard, hand half raised, and he stopped. And I watched the doubt on his face turn into something else, something like recognition, something like shame. And he turned around to the queen. And he said quietly, but in that silence everyone heard it, "Ma'am, may I have a word before we do this?" The queen's eyes flashed. "I gave you an instruction." "You did, ma'am, and I'll carry it out if you still wish it. But I think," he stopped, choosing his words like a man walking on ice, "I think there's something your majesty doesn't know about this door, and I think you'd want to know it before." The queen stared at him. For a long moment I thought she'd refuse. I thought she'd just say do it, and that would be that, and the guard would be hauled away, and the door would be opened, and the whole thing would be over. But she didn't. Maybe it was the crowd. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the strange, raw certainty on the guard's face, the face of a man who genuinely meant the words "die at this post" and was not afraid of them. Maybe, somewhere underneath all that polished royal armor, Queen Sabine was a person too, and a person can feel when they've walked into the middle of something they don't understand. She gave a short nod. The senior man stepped close to her, and he spoke to her low, just the two of them, his head bent toward hers. I couldn't hear a word, but I could watch. I could watch her face. And I will tell you, I have never in my life seen a face change the way hers changed in those 30 seconds. It started cold, annoyed, wanting to get this over with. And then, as the man spoke, I saw the cold begin to crack. I saw her eyes move toward the door, toward the guard, toward that plain, weathered black door with the unlit lamp. I saw her go very still. I saw a hand come up slowly and press against her own chest, just below the pearls, as if something had reached in and squeezed. And I swear to you, I saw her eyes fill. The senior man finished. He stepped back. And Queen Sabine stood alone in the middle of that square, in her perfect pale coat with her perfect hair, in front of 100 strangers and 40 schoolchildren, and a man with a cart of cold chestnuts. And she put her gloved hand over her mouth, and her shoulders dropped, and she looked, for just a moment, not like a queen at all. She looked like a woman who had just been told something terrible and true. She stood like that for a while, hand over her mouth, shoulders down. The Queen of Cauldres, frozen in the middle of a cold square, with the whole world watching her find out the truth. Nobody moved, nobody dared, even the wind seemed to wait. And then she lowered her hand. She took a breath. I saw her chest rise and fall with it, a long, slow, steadying breath, the kind you take when you're trying to gather the pieces of yourself back together. And she straightened up. The royal posture came back, but it was different now. Softer at the edges, like a coat worn loose instead of buttoned tight. And she walked toward the guard. The security men started forward with her, the way they always do, and she stopped them with one small lift of her hand. Just her. She wanted to do this alone. She crossed the last few steps to him by herself. And the guard, who had stood so still all morning, who had refused her to her face, who had said he would die at this post, the guard didn't know what to do. You could see it. His certainty had been built for a fight, and the fight had just vanished out from under him. He stood at attention, eyes forward, jaw tight, bracing for an anger that didn't come. The queen stopped in front of him. She looked up at him. He was a fair bit taller, and for a moment she just studied his face, the way you study someone you're seeing properly for the first time. Then she said very quietly, "What's your name, soldier?" He swallowed. "Corporal Daved, your majesty." "Corporal Daved." She said it slowly, like she wanted to remember it. "You knew her, Queen Eleonora. You made her this promise yourself." "Yes, ma'am." To her face. "Yes, ma'am." And then, after a moment, lower, "I was 19. She took my hand when I swore it. She told me," his voice caught just slightly and he pushed through it the way soldiers do, "she told me that a promise to the dead is the only kind you can't take back, because they can't release you from it, so you have to keep it for them. Forever." The queen's eyes shone. "And you've been keeping it, all this time, even after she was gone, even when you thought no one was left who knew." "Someone had to, ma'am." He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. If everyone forgets, then it's like it never mattered, and it mattered. His jaw worked. He mattered, the little prince. He was real. He was here. Someone has to remember that he was here. And that was the thing that finished her. I watched a tear come loose and slide down the queen's face, right there in front of everyone. She didn't wipe it away. She let it fall. And there was nothing practiced about it, nothing royal, nothing for the cameras. It was just grief, recognizing grief. "I didn't know," she said. Her voice had gone thick. "Corporal, I swear to you, I didn't know. They told me it was an old storeroom, a garden, overgrown, nobody used. I wanted to," she gave a small, broken laugh at herself. "I wanted to make something nice of it, a quiet place, for the staff. I thought I was doing a kind thing." Her face crumpled. "I had no idea I was trying to tear down the one place she couldn't finish it." And the guard, Corporal Daved, did something then that I think about often, because it would have been so easy in that moment to let her feel small, to let her carry the shame of it. He'd won, after all. He'd been right, and she'd been wrong, and she was standing there weeping in front of him, in front of the whole kingdom. But he didn't. He broke his attention just slightly, just enough, and he turned his head and he said to her gently, "You couldn't have known, ma'am. Nobody told you. That's not your failing. That's ours for letting it be forgotten in the first place." He paused. "You stopped. When you found out, you stopped. That's all she would have asked of anyone. That's all any of us could ask." The queen looked at him for a long moment. And then she did the most remarkable thing. She turned to the senior security man, to all of them, to the whole square really, and she said, in a clear voice that carried, "This door stays as it is. The protocol stands. exactly as Queen Eleonora ordered it, for as long as I am queen and longer." She lifted her chin. "And from this day the garden behind it will be cared for in her name and her son's, the roses tended, the fountain running, the bench kept clean." Her voice wavered, then held. "And Corporal Dave will not stand his watch alone anymore. He'll have whatever he needs. Because he is the only one of us who never forgot. And I will not have it said that the crown punished the one man who kept faith." A sound went through the crowd then. Not a gasp, something warmer, a kind of low, rolling murmur of, I don't know how else to say it, of relief, of something being made right. A few people had started to cry. The old man beside me had his cap off, held against his chest, and he was weeping openly and didn't care who saw. And then someone clapped. I don't know who started it. One person, then another. Then the school kids who'd watched the whole thing with their mouths open, all 40 of them, started clapping too, and then the whole square was doing it. 100 pairs of cold hands coming together in the gray morning, for one soldier in front of one plain black door. Corporal Dave didn't move. He'd come back to attention, eyes forward, still as stone. But I was close enough to see it. I was close enough to see the single tear that ran down his cheek and dropped off his jaw and was gone. He let them clap, and he kept his post. The Queen didn't go through the door that day. That's the part I always tell people, because it's the part that tells you who she turned out to be. She had every right to. The protocol let her in. She was the royal family now. She could have asked Dave to open it and he would have. She could have walked into that garden and seen it for herself. She didn't. She stood in front of the door for a moment with her gloved hand resting flat against the old wood, just resting it there, like you'd rest your hand on someone's shoulder. And then she stepped back, and she nodded to Dave, and she said, quietly, just for him, but I caught it. "Not today. It's not mine to walk into yet. I haven't earned it." And she turned and walked back to her cars and got in, and the black doors closed, and the engines made that low gliding hush, and she was gone. The crowd broke up slowly after that. People didn't want to leave somehow. They lingered. They kept looking back at the door, at the guard. The school kids were chattering all at once now, the spell broken, the way kids are. The chestnut man went back to his cart. Life started up again the way it does. But it was different. Everyone who'd stood in that square that morning knew they'd seen something they'd carry for the rest of their lives. I found out the rest later, in pieces, over the months that followed. The garden was restored, properly. The Queen saw to it herself, the papers said, though she kept it quiet, kept it out of the headlines, which is how you knew she meant it. The roses came back. The fountain ran again that spring. They put a small stone in the garden. I heard nothing grand, just a small stone with a boy's name on it. Theo, Prince of Caldris, 9 years old, loved. And on the first warm day of that spring, Queen Sabine finally went through the door. Alone, no cameras, no aides, just her. Nobody knows what she did in there. That's hers to keep. But the woman who told me about it, she worked in the palace. She'd seen Sabine go in. She said the Queen was in that garden a long time. And when she came out, her eyes were red, and she walked straight over to Corporal Dave at his post, and she didn't say anything at all. She just took his hand. The way Eleonora had all those years ago, when he was 19 and she made him promise. And she held it for a moment, and then she let it go, and she walked back inside. I went back to that square once, a long time after. I don't fully know why. I think I just wanted to see if it was still there, if it had been real. It was a warm evening this time, the light going gold across the old stones. The fountain in the square running and full of water and children dropping coins in it. The chestnut man was gone, different season, but everything else was the same. The gates, the palace, the rows of dark windows, and the plain black door, and a guard in front of it. It wasn't Dave. It had been years, of course it wasn't. It was a younger man, someone I'd never seen, standing straight and still in the long coat and the tall cap. But he stood that same way. That particular way. Not the way you stand for a show, the way you stand for something you actually believe in. And I understood watching him that the promise had been passed on. That whatever Dave had carried, he'd hand it to the next one, and that one would hand it to the next, and on and on. That somewhere in that palace there was now a tradition, a quiet one, a private one, where every soldier who took that post was told the story of a frail little prince and a grieving mother and a corporal who once told a queen no in front of the whole kingdom, and made his promise, to her face. I stood there in the gold evening light, and I watched that young guard keep his watch. And I thought about how the whole world is so loud now, how everyone's shouting to be remembered, building monuments to themselves, terrified of being forgotten, and how the truest act of remembrance I ever saw in my life was the quietest thing imaginable, one man, standing still in front of a plain door, asking nothing, telling no one, keeping faith with a child the world had never even known existed. That's the thing nobody tells you about honor. It doesn't look like much. It doesn't roar. It just stands there in the cold doing the right thing when no one's watching and no one would ever know. I left as the sun went down. I didn't look back. But I've never forgotten that door. And I never will. Because some promises don't end when the person you made them to is gone. Some promises, the real ones, you keep forever.